All right. Welcome everyone to ISTQB training certified tester foundation level session number 15. I hope you all are fine and doing well. As usual, if there are any questions in the middle of the session, just feel free to post your question in the Q&A section and then we can go through that. Before we begin our session, let's just have a recap of what we did in our last session. So last week, we finished our module of test techniques. In that, we covered white box test techniques and experience-based test techniques. Okay, if we just have an overview of all the modules in the syllabus of ISTQB foundation level, then so far we have covered the first 4 modules, and today we will be beginning the new module, which is test management. Okay, in test management, the module itself has these subsections, which are test organization, test planning and estimation, test monitoring and control, configuration management, risks and testing, and defect management. So in this module, we will cover all these subsections. Okay, starting with the first one, which is test organization. So first, let's have a look at what are our learning objectives, what we will learn in this submodule of test organization. So in test organization, we will understand that what are the benefits and what are the drawbacks of independent testing. And this will be covered in K2. So if someone is not familiar about what are these key levels, then we mentioned this in our first session, I think. So you can refer to those slides. In that, we did mention all the key levels. And the second objective, learning objective, is identification of the tasks of the test manager and tester. So in a testing activity, there are different test roles. So we will go through that. So let's just start with independent testing. So earlier, I think in our second session, we did briefly went through this term of independence testing, that what is independent testing and what are the benefits, why it's useful. So now we will go through it in a bit more detail. So independence in testing, it refers to the separation between the author of the material which is to be tested and the author of the test themselves. So over here, why we are using the term author? Because the material which needs to be tested, it can be code or it can be a document as well. It can be design as well. So that's why instead of using the term developer, we use the term author of the material to be tested. And the same goes on the other side as well. Instead of using just the term tester, we say author of the test themselves, because we know that at different test levels, the person who is doing the testing can be different. It doesn't have to be the tester always. So that's why we use these terms author, and maybe in your exam as well you will see these terms. So please don't be confused by the term author. Just see the entire sentence and you should be able to understand that what is being asked in the question. Okay, so over here, if you see these 5 blocks, so we will be going through these 5 levels, and as we progress towards the right, it will show the increase in the level of independence of testing. So let's start with the first one. The first one is no independent testers, developers testing their own code. So this is the lowest level of independence of testing. That it's a scenario where in the team there are no testers, and the developer who has developed a code himself is testing the application as well. So they are testing their own code. So this is the lowest level of independence, because the same person who written the code is doing the testing as well. Yes, for few instances like unit testing, like which is component testing, at that level, yes, the person who is writing the code, the developer, should be doing the testing. But over here, we are just talking about the level of independence. Okay, the second one is independent developers or testers within development team. Okay, so this would be a scenario where there is a development team and the developers and testers are working together in that team, and maybe the application is tested by any other developer in the same team. So the developer who has developed the application or has written that specific code is not the one who is testing. It's the another developer, but still it is the developer, not a tester. That's one scenario. And the other one is or testers. So mostly in agile teams nowadays, there is a team and a tester is a part of that team. So this scenario refers to that the tester is also part of the same development team. So yes, though the tester is a separate role, but still they are part of the same development team. So to some extent, there is some level of independence, but not huge. The third one is that there is an independent tester, same organization, same manager. So this can be a scenario where there are two different teams, a development team and a tester team, the test team, and the tester is part of an independent team. They are part of the same organization, and both of these teams have the same manager. So this is also a very, very common practice that there are multiple teams, though the teams are independent, but they are managed by the same person. So that's why this is still in the middle, because the person who is managing the team, maybe multiple teams, can influence um, maybe testing or development, or if the same manager is also managing any other team as well. So though it is giving you some level of independence, but not entirely, because if the manager is the same and the same manager has to manage different kind of things, like maybe the delivery as well of the project and also testing of the project, then maybe there will be various factors which will affect the way the manager is planning everything. The fourth one is independent tester, same organization, but different manager. So now we are talking about the same scenario which was earlier, that it's the same company. There are two different teams, but instead of one manager managing multiple teams, we have different managers. So we have a development, let's say we have a development team and we have a development manager, and we have a test team and we have a test manager. So now the level of independence is slightly more than before, because now the managers' interests and their roles are totally different. Though they will be working together, but there will be more independence the way they will plan their activities. And if we see the last one, high level of independence, it's independent tester and a different organization. So over here, what we are talking about is that there is an independent tester, but let's say we have outsourced another company who will be doing testing for us. So we have a project and we have developed it ourselves, but when it comes to testing, we have outsourced testing and a different organization is doing testing for us. So this would be the highest level of independence. So we did mention that earlier, that independent testing is really good. And now we have gone through the levels of independence. But it's not necessary that always this highest level of independence would be the best scenario to go for. And we will see why. Okay, so first of all, it's always best to have testing at multiple levels. So we did went through the levels of testing where we went through various levels of testing. So it's better that whenever we are planning our testing, we plan for testing at different levels, and at different levels, of course, the independence of testing would be different. So let's say that if you're talking about system testing, then system testing will be best handled by independent testers, maybe in the same company or maybe outside. And then if we talk about component testing, then developers are the best people to do that. So if we want to achieve an ideal independent testing scenario, then it's better that we perform testing at different levels, and then we can plan that, okay, that at this level, who will be the best person to do the testing, and the same goes for the other levels of testing. So that would be the best scenario. Independence of testing also depends on SDLC model. Okay, so now this one is also really, really important. So let's say if we are doing a waterfall project, then we are completing all the activities, and then at the end, we are doing testing. So in the end, maybe there is an independent test team and in the same company, and then we can ask them to assign a resource, a test resource to that project, because now that project is finished. So at that time, only the test manager may allocate a test resource to that project, and the tester will finish the testing after going through the requirements, etc. This is one scenario. Or there is an independent company who is doing the testing for that project. So in waterfall projects, it's very easy to outsource testing because the requirements are quite defined, well defined, they are well documented. There is very less risk of changes being made. So mostly it's a good candidate to outsource testing, because we can hand over all the documents and they can just design the test cases, execute the test cases, and let us know the results back. So this is, so it depends that which SDLC model we are using. On the other hand, if we are using agile model, then usually testers are part of the same team. There's one team and developers and testers are in the same team. So that's why it's mentioned over here that independence of testing depends on SDLC model. So in that scenario, in that SDLC model, that would be the best situation, the best model of the team working together. So tester and developer would be in the same team. And though if we go back to the level of independence, it's not very independent as per this diagram over here, but depending on the type of SDLC model they are working, that would be the best way to work. Testers may be part of an independent test team. Okay, so now again, it can apply to a waterfall or an agile methodology as well, that there's a separate team who are doing the testing. The third one is product owners may perform acceptance testing at the end of the iteration. Okay, so if we are working in a model where it's the same team and the same team has development, a developer, tester, and product owner, then usually because they are working together as the same team, then the tester, when the tester is testing, that is sufficient. But let's say if we are working in a model where there's an independent test team, a test resource is testing and then feeding back the results to the development team. In that case, mostly the product owners, they do perform an acceptance testing at the end of each iteration, just to make sure that there is nothing missed by the tester, because in that setting, the product owner and the tester are not in the same team, and they might not be that vocal, that communicative to each other, with each other, as usually they would be if they are in the same team. So I hope that this part is clear, that how independence testing can vary based on the levels of testing, and also the SDLC model we are using for that particular project. Okay, let's just go through some benefits of test independence. So the first one is identify different kinds of failures compared to developers. Okay, so we did cover this thing before as well, that the objectives of a developer and tester are completely different. So there are more chances that the independent testers, they are likely to find more faults. They can find different kind of failures which maybe a developer who has written the code may not find. So that's why this is one of the biggest benefit of test independence. The second one is verify, challenge, or disprove assumptions made by stakeholders. Okay, so now the stakeholders, or maybe someone, stakeholders can be someone who has written the specifications, who has given us the requirements for that system. So they would be having a specific mindset about that system. If there is a independent tester who has not been part of writing of the requirements, etc., then maybe when that tester is testing that system, they can either verify that whatever the assumptions were made by the stakeholders are correct, or they can also challenge them that, okay, I don't think that it's correct, so maybe we can have a further discussion and then reach to a conclusion. Or they can simply disprove that, no, this assumption which was made earlier in the requirements, it's completely wrong, and this is the reason why. And so that's why we are getting different perspective from a tester on that system. So that's why the independence of testing is beneficial. The third one is report in an upright and objective manner without any pressure. Okay, so let's go back to this slide. Okay, so over here we said that the higher level of independence is when the independent tester is in a different organization. So in this scenario, because the tester is not part of the same organization, the tester doesn't have any kind of pressure, and the tester can work independently and without any pressure, and without any kind of politics in the company, because that tester is completely independent. While when it comes to pressure, it can apply to actually the first four in different levels. So that's what's mentioned over here, that benefits of test independence is that it can report in an upright and objective manner without any pressure. So the tester, as the more independent the tester would be, the tester would be testing in more objective manner. Objective manner means like they will be concentrating more on the objectives of testing, rather than that, okay, how much time is left, and what are the other constraints, and maybe someone is pressurizing them to, okay, we don't have time, we don't have budget, you have to finish it by tomorrow, those kind of pressures. So the more independence would be there, the more upright and in the objective manner they can work properly. So these are the main benefits of test independence. Now let's go through the drawbacks of test independence. The first one is isolation from the development team. Okay, so now this can be a drawback. So we said that the more independent a tester would be, there would be no pressure, and the tester can focus more on the objectives of testing, can do the job well. But on the same hand, this can be a drawback as well, because they are not in touch with the development team. They are isolated. They are not part of the same team. So they might, they are not might that familiar with the changes, or maybe some requirements which were discussed within the team, but they are not familiar because maybe that was not documented. So it happens many times that, let's say if we have outsourced a testing project and we are providing them all the updates, all the details, the documents are given, and we are trying our best to update them as much as possible, but still it cannot compare that how you communicate with a person sitting right next to you. Because maybe a person who is sitting right next to you, you are just discussing something, and while that discussion, first of all, you are developing a good relationship with that person in that team, and secondly, you might be just ad hocly discussing few major things of the project, which actually give you more familiarity of the system. So that's why this can be one of the drawback, that isolation from the development team. Second is developers may lose the sense of responsibility for quality, especially when we are talking about the quality of a project. Though the tester, a test is the owner of how the quality is assessed and it's managed, but when it comes to responsibility, it's not solely tester's responsibility. It's the responsibility of the entire team, that they deliver a good quality product. So every team member, they have a separate responsibility towards quality, like the responsibility of a requirement, um, an analyst, whoever is gathering all the requirements, would be that they gather the requirements in a good format. They provide all the required information. The acceptance criteria should be there. The developers will contribute towards the quality of the product by developing it by following the coding standards, etc. So there are different team members in the team, and they all owe towards the quality of the product they are delivering. So if there is a complete test independence, then maybe the developers may lose that sense of responsibility for quality. On the other hand, if they are working together in the same team, so they all are aware of the goal, their goal, which is like one goal they are all working towards, which is that they have to deliver it without or with few bugs. The third one is testers may be seen as a bottleneck. Okay, so if the test team is independent, and let's say that it's a separate team within the same company or in another company, and they are testing it separately, then sometimes they can be seen as a bottleneck from, and they are like preventing them to deliver to production. So they can be blamed as that it's we are not able to deliver because testers are still testing it. While when they are working in the same team, then there are many activities which can be done in parallel as well. And because they are in the same team, so the other team members also understand that how the tester is testing and like how much time they should be given, etc. So test independence can be taken as a bottleneck as well, because the testers are totally isolated, so the other team members might not be familiar of how they are working, and because they are not that familiar with the tester himself as well. So that's why it can be taken as a drawback as well. And the last one is testers may lack some important information. So this is quite linked to what we said in the first one, isolation from the development team, that some information might be missing from the documents, which maybe the team members, they just discussed with them verbally, and that was not documented. So maybe the tester who is independent, not in the same office, or in the same office but in a separate team, they are not aware of any major information which might affect the way they are designing the test cases or executing the test cases, etc. So this is also a drawback of test independence. Okay, so with that, now we are done with the independent testing. If there is any question on that, you may ask that. Otherwise, we can continue. I will just have a quick look if there is any question. Okay, there is nothing. So we can move on to the next section, which is tasks of a test manager and tester. Okay, so when we talk about the testing roles, there are different ways a test structure you will see in different organizations. And there are multiple roles. There can be a test manager, a test analyst, test engineer, and test leader, test coordinator, head of test, quality assurance manager. So there are different roles which are part of the testing structure of an organization, and everywhere it varies from one role to another. And there is nothing wrong with that, because it all depends that how it it works well with the other structure, with the remaining structure of that organization apart from testing. But in terms of this syllabus of ISTQB CTFL, we will only discuss two roles, which is test manager and tester. So first of all, we'll go through the tasks of a test manager. And this is not an extensive list of the definitive list of the tasks a test manager will do, because as I said, that it depends on each organization. Everyone's structure is different. And similarly, the tasks a test manager might do in one organization would be completely different from the task a test manager in another organization will carry on. So that would be completely different. So these are just few tasks which a test manager may perform. Okay, so the first one is develop or review a test policy and test strategy for the organization. Okay, so we did discuss briefly about the test policy and test strategies previously as well. So in this case, of course, if the manager who is managing the testing activity for that organization would be responsible to define and also review the policy, the test policy and the test strategy for the organization. So if there is no test policy and strategy, then of course a test manager should be developing that. And then this is because this is an organizational level document, then it should be reviewed maybe after 6 months or maybe a year. It depends that like how many changes, how frequently the testing structure or the activities are being changed in the company. So based on that, they can review that whether it should be annual review or maybe after every 6 months. So it depends. And then based on that, the test policy and strategy can be defined and reviewed. The second one is plan the test activities by considering the context and understanding the test objectives and risks. Okay, so this is quite important. Whenever a manager is planning that which test activities will be performed, and there are different factors which actually contribute to the way and which test activities will be performed. And mostly the main part is the context. So what's the context? Context is mostly the circumstances which actually lead to a specific event, which affects the specific event, in this case, of course, the project and the test activities. So it depends on the context and also the understanding of the test objectives and risks. That what are the objectives? we want to achieve from that, from those test activities, and also what are the associated risks. So this is what is the responsibility of a test manager. The third one is write and update the test plans. Okay, so just like a manager's responsibility is to write the test policy and the test strategy, the manager is also responsible to write and also update the test plan as well. So a test plan can be taken differently for different type of SDLC models. Like in the waterfall model, maybe you will just write a test plan in the beginning of testing, and then that would be approved and signed by all the key people involved in that project. Or if you are doing agile, then this plan can be more of a like a continuing update as the project follows. So it depends that what kind of strategy you what kind of approach you are using, which SDLC model you are using. So a manager is responsible for writing and update the plans. So now over here we are saying that this is the responsibility of a test manager. But let's say there can be a company, maybe a startup, where there is only one test resource, and that test resource is doing everything. So in that case, though the title might be just test analyst, but that test analyst, because there's no one else over there, that analyst might be writing the test plan himself as well. So it depends that what's the team structure. The fourth one is coordinate the test plans with project managers, product owners, and others. Okay, so yes, so the test manager has written the test plan, but test plan is not only the document for the test team, it's for that entire project. So that's why it's really important that it is reviewed and agreed by the other key people, which can be the product owners, which can be the project managers, it can be the development manager as well. Because the contents of test plan, there are many things which will apply to the other team members as well. So that's why it's important that it is reviewed and agreed beforehand by other key people as well. Number 5 is share testing perspectives with other project activities such as integration planning. Okay, so sometimes when we work on test plan, there are different ways of working on test plan. There can be a one test plan for the entire project, which sometimes is also referred as a master test plan. Or sometimes for different test levels, so we have different test levels like component, integration, system, acceptance. So for all test levels, we can have a separate test plan as well, which is known as the level test plan. So in this point, number 5, it's assumed that there is a level test plan for integration level, and over here then they share the testing perspectives with other project activities. So let's say if we are doing integration planning, then it's the manager's job to share that how what will be the testing perspectives, and those needs to be shared with the other project activities going on for that specific project. Number 6 is initiate the analysis, design, implementation, and execution of tests, monitor test progress and results, and check the status of exit criteria and facilitate test completion activities. So in short, a test manager is responsible for all these activities, starting from the analysis of a project and ending with the test completion activities. So from end to end, test activities, whenever it comes to how to initiate, plan, and monitoring and communicating the test results, etc. That's the responsibility of a test manager. Okay, over here we have written exit criteria or definition of done. Okay, so it's the same thing, but it depends that in which context we are using. So if we are using, let's say in a traditional test plan, we use entry criteria and exit criteria, which we will go through in next session. Or if we are doing an agile scrum, then we don't have exit criteria. We use the term definition of done, that okay, this user story is now will be done if we meet this acceptance criteria and the testing is completed as well. So that's why it's written exit criteria or definition of done, depending on what's the context, what's the model we are using for testing. Okay, the next one is prepare and deliver test progress reports and test summary reports based on the information gathered. Okay, so once the testing has begun, depending on what kind of project it is, how long it is, and what kind of methodology you are using for that project, it can be agreed that how often and what kind of test progress reports needs to be communicated to the wider team. And that's the responsibility of a test manager. It can be as often as a daily report as well, that maybe at the end of each day, a test manager needs to send out an email with the report attached that yes, what's the status, how many bugs are there, what are the severities, etc. How likely is it to that we can meet the deadline, etc. And at the end, when the project completes, then at the end a test summary report is also generated. So it can either be sent with an email, or if we are using any kind of test management tools, then mostly all these things are quite transparent, and anyone who is interested to see the results, they can just see the statistics. So sometimes formal reports needs to be communicated, sometimes it's just a matter of logging to the test management system and everyone can see the results. Number 8 is adapt planning based on test results and progress and take any actions necessary for test control. Okay, now this is also a very important task for a test manager. Maybe in the beginning, there was some test planning done and everything was going as per the plan, but when we are talking about delivering a project, developing a project, there are different stages and there are a few things which might not be predictable. And maybe that in the beginning we plan to deliver a project in 1 month, but there can be some circumstances due to which we are not able to deliver that. And then at the end, when we are testing, and there are lots of defects, and then now based on that we can see that okay, we have only 2 weeks left and we are not able to deliver in those 2 weeks, then it's a test manager's job to maybe change the planning based on the time they have, what kind of risks are there, what kind of strategy approach they need to adapt. So this is all the responsibility of a test manager, that what is the likelihood that by doing these changes we can deliver in next 2 weeks. Number 9, support setting up the defect management system and adequate configuration management of testware. Okay, so this also lies under the responsibilities of a test manager, that whatever the defect management system they are using, it can be as simple as using Excel sheets. It can be any defect management system like Jira, or maybe any other tool which we are using for reporting and storing all the defects. So this is a responsibility of a test manager to review that what kind of defect management tool they are supposed to use, and then communicate it to the wider team as well, and also of course their own team as well. And adequate configuration management of testware. So whatever they are testing, whatever tool or product they are using for testing, they are responsible for configuring that tool with their existing environment in their infrastructure. So it's responsibility of test manager to make sure that whatever tool they are using, it is configured well in their environment and it's working. Number 10, introduced suitable metrics for measuring test progress and evaluating the quality of the testing and the product. Okay, now this one is also very important because anything which can't be measured, it can't be managed. So everyone wants a good quality of their product, but how will we assess the good quality? Of course, we have to define some metrics for that, these are the metrics which we will gather for each testing activity. It can be anything. It depends that what applies to you, to your company, what works well for you. It can be maybe that the number of defects found during testing of a sprint, or maybe the whole project, or maybe that how frequently the requirements were changing during the project, because of course that will affect the time in which you will finish the testing. It can also be that the traceability between requirements and the test cases, that do you have the test cases for all the requirements? It can be one of the metric, because then it can identify if there are any gaps between the requirements and testing. Or it can be that if when the testing was done by the team, then how many bugs were reported in production which were missed by the test team, because that will also give us an idea of that though the testing was completed, it was signed off, but still there were lots of bugs in production, so that there is a root cause analysis is done for that and identify if there were any gaps, and by which maybe we can improve the coverage of testing next time. So all these are metrics, and there are lots of metrics, but the test manager needs to identify that which test metrics will be useful for that specific project, or maybe for the entire company, depending on the way they are working. And the same metrics then will help them to evaluate the quality of testing, because then for different projects the same metrics can be different, and then maybe one product would be of a better quality, and we can do the same for the other products as well. So metrics are very important. The next one is, sorry, these two are 11. I will change it later. So of course they are 14 over here. So 11 is support the selection and implementation of tools to support the test process, including recommending the budget for tool selection, allocating time and effort for pilot projects, and providing continuing support in the use of the tools. Okay, so just like defect management tool, the other tools as well, whatever the tools a team is using for testing, the test manager's job is to select and implement those tools to be used by the team. So sometimes a test manager needs to review maybe multiple tools and then see that which tool will be a good fit for their company, and then based on that then also implement that tool, and also support the learning as well. And also whenever they are selecting a tool, it's a good fit, and also whether do they have the budget for that specific tool or not. So all these are the responsibilities of test manager. The next one is decide about the implementation of test environments. Okay, so now test environments, there are different environments in an organization. So one is the local environment, or maybe you can call it as a dev environment, where the developers are developing the system. So maybe they are just using their local environment and then just committing everything to the test environment, or maybe they are working on their local environment, then there's a dev environment, and then there's a test environment, or there can be multiple test environments. So a test manager is responsible to decide that what kind of test environments are required, what will be the usage of these test environments, and how a project will transit from one environment to another, and whatever is required in terms of implementation of those test environments is also responsibilities of a test manager. The next one is promote and advocate the testers, the test team, and the test profession within the organization. So a test manager, of course, if there is a test manager in the in an organization, then it means that there would be a test team as well, because of course if there's a test manager, as the name implies, there would be a team as well, a test team, and who are reporting directly to that manager. So that test manager is responsible to manage that team, which also includes leading them, also training them, and also promoting them. Means like that when they are analyzing the capabilities of the testers, and also they are making sure that they are performing well. And when time comes to maybe promote a tester, then that's the responsibility of a test manager as well, based on whether the objective set for that tester has been met or not. So a test manager will analyze the capabilities of a tester as well, and then train accordingly. 13 is develop the skills and careers of testers, for example, through training plans, performance evaluation, and coaching, etc. So this is quite related to the earlier one. So it's a responsibility of the manager that they are providing the required training to their team members, and they are also evaluating the performance of their team, and then based on that, coming up with the objectives of that specific tester in their team, because there might be 5 testers under a test manager, and all those 5 would be different. Each one of them, they will have their own strength, their own weakness. So it's the responsibility of a test manager to evaluate their performance, and then based on their weaknesses or strengths, then define some objectives so that they can improve the performance of the tester. Okay, now with that, we have covered most of the tasks, the most common tasks which are for a test manager. Now we will come to the next part, which is tasks of a tester. Okay, so now over here, the first one is review and contribute to test plans. So a test manager will write the test plan, update the test plan, but a test manager will always include the tester as well. So let's say if I am the test manager, if I have written a test plan, and of course I am sharing it not only with my testing team, also with the wider team as well. So I'm expecting that when I'm sharing it with the tester who will be working on that specific project, will review and contribute to test plans, because as a test manager, maybe I will not be working as closely as that tester would be on that project. So that tester will always have to review the test plan and come back with their feedback that, okay, no, I think it would be more appropriate if we add this, or this doesn't apply to our project. So a tester is working closely on that project, so can bring really useful feedback to a test plan. Number 2, analyze, review, and assess requirements, user stories, and acceptance criteria, specifications, and models for testability, that is the test cases. Okay, so again, the tester, because they are working closely with the development team, the tester is responsible to actually perform the testing activity. So they are the one who have to review and assess the requirements. It can be a document, it can be user stories, and also that the acceptance criteria is given or not. Because of course, when they are testing, they are analyzing it with this mindset that whether they have everything which they require to test that specific requirement. Number 3, identify and document test conditions and capture traceability between test cases, test conditions, and test bases. Okay, so traceability, as we already covered in quite detail earlier, is the responsibility of a tester to document all the test conditions. It might be that they are just documenting the test cases, and maybe they are just mapping the the traceability between the requirements and the test cases. So it depends that whatever the test bases are, then mapping it with the conditions and test cases to identify if there are any gaps, and then they can cover those gaps as well. Number 4, design, set up, and verify test environments, often coordinating with system administration and network management. Okay, so when it comes to test environment, we said that it's the responsibility of the test manager to identify and implement and manage the test environment. But over here, when it comes to the setting up and the designing of the test environment, a tester's role is quite vital, because a tester is someone who has designed the test cases, and the tester knows that what actually they are looking for the specific test environment. So that's why the tester would be coordinating with whoever is working on setting up that test environment. So it can be someone from the system administration team, it can be someone from the network team, from infrastructure team. So a tester will be working quite closely to make sure that whatever is required in terms of that test environment is there. Okay, the next one is design and implement test cases and test procedures. Okay, so this is quite obvious that a tester who is responsible to work on that project will be the one who will be designing of the test cases, and also will implement either its test procedures or the test cases. The next one is prepare and acquire test data. So while the test cases or procedures are designed, at that time, it will be quite clear to the tester that what kind of test data they require in order to test. Maybe if they are testing the login functionality, and as per the requirements, there are different roles. For each roles, the login would be different for that system. Then it means that they require the login credentials for each role type. Maybe there is a user, and then there'll be an admin. There can be maybe a manager. So there can be different role types, which means that now the tester needs different test data to test all these different roles. So this is just an example, but while designing the test case, a tester does know that what kind of test data they require. So it's responsibility of a tester to prepare and get that test data, because maybe there are some limitations in the project, so that if they have planned a test case and they don't have the test data for that, then they have to work with the wider team to get that test data. So it's the responsibility of the tester. Okay, number 7 is create the detailed test execution schedule. Okay, so a tester would be executing all the tests. So they need to come up with a schedule that how they are planning to execute the test, and they have to share that schedule, or maybe if not share, then maybe just mention it to the team members that how they are planning to do it. And then the next one is execute test, evaluate the results, and document deviations from expected results. So when they have prepared the tests and they are ready to execute, they will execute the test, and then based on the execution, they will, based on the requirements, they will see that if the tests are passed or failed. And then, of course, they will also share the details of the test execution as well. Number 9, use appropriate tools to facilitate the test process. Okay, so a test process might have several test activities, and the test activities will require maybe different tools. And this will be the responsibility of a tester to see that which appropriate tools they need to use for a specific activity. And because sometimes these can be planned earlier, because they might be aware of that what kind of testing they will be doing and what tools they should use. So it's always ideal to plan it before, but maybe in the middle of the testing, if the scenarios are changed and they have to do some runtime changes, then maybe they will come up with different tools to use based on that situation. Number 10, automate tests as needed, may be supported by a developer or a test automation expert. So the tester, in this case, we are referring to a manual tester. So a tester might need to automate test, and they might be able to automate test themselves, or maybe with the help of a developer, or maybe there is an automation testing team, separate team, and they can take their help. So this is also something they can plan beforehand as well, that okay, in this project, maybe these are the tests which I will be executing multiple times. So it will be easier and quicker if I automate these tests. Okay, the next one is evaluate non-functional characteristics such as performance, efficiency, reliability, usability, security, compatibility, and portability. Okay, so we already covered that all these are different types of non-functional testing. So for a specific project, if they are required to do non-functional testing, then of course that would also come as the task of a tester to perform all these activities for these different kind of non-functional testing, and also evaluate and share the results. The last one is review tests developed by others. Okay, it might be the case that the tester, there are other testers who have developed the tests and they are reviewing it. And it can be that there is a third party who has written the test, and then before they start executing, it is agreed that the tester from the internal team will review the test cases and identify if there are any gaps, which means that there are two test teams, internal and external, and they are working together and they have shared the responsibilities. So this is also coming under the task of a tester. So with that, we have covered the tasks of a tester and a test manager. The next one is test planning and estimation. If there are any questions for the previous one, the tasks, then please let me know. Otherwise, we can continue the next section, which is test planning and estimation. So in test planning and estimation, we have different learning objectives, and we'll not be able to cover all of them today, but we will at least cover one, I think first two. Yeah, we'll try our best to finish the first two, which is summarize purpose and content of a test plan, and differentiate between various test strategies. Okay, so I haven't seen any questions so far, so we can then continue. All right, so we have covered what is a test plan and like why we need a test plan. So let's just go through the definition as well. So a test plan outlines test activities for development and maintenance projects. So it can be, a test plan can be for a new project, or maybe if there are any changes in the project and later on there is like a new version release, so yeah, it will be there'll be an updated test plan for the maintenance projects as well. So a test plan can be, as we said, that it can be a master test plan, it can be a level test plan for each test level, and all it needs to mention is that what kind of test activities we will be performing and when. So this is all detailed in a test plan. There are different factors which actually influence the way we plan the testing of a project. And a test plan is influenced by these factors, which are the test policy and the test strategy as well, both of them. So if the test policy, okay, so test policy and test strategy, they are mostly an organization level documents. But in some cases, you will also see that a test strategy document is based on a project or a product, or maybe multiple projects. So it depends that how you are working with these documents. There is nothing right or wrong, but whatever is adapted by the company, then that's what needs to be taken as a base, and then all the other documents should be written and worked on in the same way. So if, let's say, if in our company team test policy and test strategy are the organization level documents, then the test plan would be for a separate project, and whatever was written in the test policy and test strategy, I will be taking that as a base and then work on my test plan. The next one is development lifecycle. Of course, that's a very key role, that what kind of SDLC model we are using. So that will influence the way our test plan will look. Then what's the scope of testing? Then what are we testing? Like sometimes in test plan, we can say that, oh, we are, let's say in test strategy, we have written that we do automation testing, we do non-functional testing, we use BDT framework, we use this, like different kind of approaches. But in that specific project, non-functional testing is not required. So we will say that this non-functional testing is not in scope of testing of this project. So that's what is really, really important, that we mention that what is the scope of testing. The next one is objectives, that we have to mention in a test plan that what are the objectives of testing, the testing which will be performed, for which we are writing this test plan. What are the objectives, what we are trying to achieve from that. Then the risks, whatever the risks which we can identify at that level, we have to mention that in the test plan. And maybe as the test plan is a continuous activity, maybe down the project that risk is resolved, and then we can just update a new version of the test plan and mention that this risks was mitigated by doing this action, etc. So we need to identify the risk, because let's say that I write a test plan as a test manager and I don't identify a risk, and later on I'm saying that, oh, there was a risk in this project, and I will be asked that, why didn't you mention that in the test plan? Why didn't you point it out earlier? So it's my responsibility as a test manager that I have to identify the risk in the test plan. And the same is with the constraints as well, that what kind of constraints do we have for that specific project? It might be that there are not enough resources, which actually it's covered separately. So maybe I can say the budget. Budget can be constraints as well, or the time given to us for testing can be a constraint. So I need to mention all these things in the test plan. Then there is criticality, that how critical this project is, because if there is something which is highly critical and maybe it's not clear to us as a team in the beginning when I'm writing the test plan, then it needs to be mentioned in the test plan. And so that when we are sharing this test plan with the wider team, maybe someone can guide us through it and provide some really useful information. The next one is testability, that let's say that there are 5 requirements in that project, but one of them is not testable, maybe due to lack of environment, or maybe for any other reason. Maybe we don't have test data for that. So, so that needs to be specified so that we can work on that. Or maybe it can be just identified that, okay, we don't need to test that. Okay, so the next one is availability of resources. Okay, that how many resources do we have available for that? Because when we are doing test planning, of course, based on the project and the availability of test resources, we define that how much time do we need for testing, and how many resources do we have availability throughout that scheduled period of time is quite critical thing. Okay, a few more points about the test plan. It may be documented in a project test plan, master test plan, and separate test plans for different levels of testing, which we already covered, like for example, system or acceptance testing, or for different test types, for example, usability or performance testing. So we already covered this, that they can be master test plans, they can be level test plans, or they can be test plans based on different types of testing as well. The next point is test planning is a continuous activity and is performed throughout the product's life cycle. Okay, so yeah, we mentioned this before as well, that test plan is a continuous activity. There can be multiple versions, and there will be multiple versions of the test plan as we proceed with the project, because there can be different updates in the project which we need to reflect in the test plan as well. So as the project and test planning progress, more information becomes available and more detail can be included in the test plan. Feedback from test activities should be used to recognize changing risks so that planning can be adjusted. So as we proceed with the test, sometimes in the beginning we do identify some risks which can be mitigated later on. So of course we need to mention that as well. Or maybe in the beginning, we didn't identify few risks which were not very apparent until we were in the middle of testing. And at that time, if there were any risks, not only in testing, but in the project itself are realized, then we need to update the test plan accordingly, because it might require change in the approach of testing as well. So we need to keep the test plan updated. Okay, so when we come to the test planning activities, so these are not like all of them, but some of the main activities for test planning are determining the scope, objectives, and risks of testing, which we already covered, defining the overall approach of testing. We will talk more in detail about the approach of testing further, but that will be covered in the test plan as well. Integrating and coordinating the test activities into the software lifecycle activities, making decisions about what to test, the people, and the other resources required to perform the various test activities, and how test activities will be carried out. So all these information need to be stated in the test plan, because this is all part of test planning, that what would be tested, how it would be tested, which people would be testing, what kind of testing, etc. So this needs to be part of the test planning activity. The next one is scheduling of test analysis, design, implementation, execution, and evaluation activities, either on particular dates or in the context of each iteration. Okay, so it depends on what kind of model you are using. If we are using sequential development, means like a waterfall, then we do have like a project plan that will start this activity on this date. Maybe like the design would finish on this date, development will start and end in this date, then testing will get time from this to this date. So we have to schedule, or scheduling is part of test planning. But this kind of scheduling with particular dates is not possible for an iterative model. So in that, we have to schedule with the context of the each iteration, that when each iteration is ending. All right, the next one is selecting metrics for test monitoring and control. That, as I already mentioned, that the test manager is responsible for identifying the test metrics. So over here, which metrics we'll be selecting for the test monitoring and control, that's also part of a test planning activity. The next one is budgeting for test activities, that if there are multiple test activities, then it's part of test planning that what will be the budget for each test activity. Because if we have planned it in the beginning, then it will be easier to monitor throughout the project. Last one is determining the level of detail and structure for test documentation, for example, by providing templates or example documents. Okay, so with that, we are done with the purpose and content of a test plan. Just the last thing, that there is another standard, which is ISO IEC IEEE 29119-3. And over here, you can get a sample test plan structure or a sample test plan. So if you are looking for a very basic template, a guideline and outline, then this is the standard, which has given us a basic outline of what should be, how a test plan should look like. Okay, so the next one is test strategy and test approach. So we already know that what is a test strategy. So each organization should have a separate test policy and a test strategy document. Over here, now we are just seeing that how test strategy and test approach are linked to each other. And if there are any differences, actually these two complement each other. So let's see how. So test strategy is a generalized description of the test process, usually at the product or organization level. So as I said, that mostly it is done on organization level, but even if a company is planning to do it on a product level, there is nothing wrong with that. They can do that as well, but then they have to be consistent with that approach. Like if they are using a test strategy for one product, then they should be having a test strategy document for each product. On the other hand, the test approach is the implementation of the test strategy for an individual project or a release. So test strategy and test approach. Test approach is basically the way we are implementing the test strategy. The test strategy, it depends on the complexity and goals of the project, type of product which is being developed, or the product risk analysis. While the test approach, it depends more on the context. So remember, we mentioned that the context is the circumstances, the factors. And what are those circumstances? Like risks, safety, availability of resource and skills, what kind of technology we are using, what's the nature of the system, what are the objectives of testing, and if there are any standards or regulations involved. So based on all these test approach, all these factors, we will define a test approach for a specific test strategy, that how we are implementing that test strategy. There are few starting points for this test approach. So test approach can be a starting point for selecting a test technique, a test level, a test types, and also defining the entry and exit criteria or definition of ready or done. So this is how the test strategy and test approach, they are linked to each other, and still there are some differences as well. Okay, so we'll talk about some common types of test strategies. So there can be some others as well, but on high level, there are these kind of test strategies. Usually when we are writing a test strategy, we don't write these the names of these types of test strategies, because as we will go through all these types, you will understand that when we are coming to a test strategy, we already have all these things in our mind, and ideally we will come up with a mixture of all these types, and then we will come up with a test strategy. So usually that's the main thing which we are doing, but for the sake of this syllabus, I think it would be good if we can identify these types of test strategies. Okay, so first one is analytical. So this kind of test strategy is based on an analysis of some factor, for example, the requirement or risk. For example, risk-based testing, where tests are designed and prioritized based on the level of risk. So this is how we are analyzing. So this test strategy is mostly based on the risk base, that what's the risks involved for that project. And based on that, the tests are designed and prioritized. The next one is model-based. Tests are designed based on some model of some required aspect of the product, such as a function, a business process, and internal structure, or a non-functional characteristics, for example, reliability. Okay, so over here, in the previous one, it was analytical, means that we are analyzing that what kind of risks we are included, and based on that, we are defining a test strategy. Over here, it depends on a model that maybe if it's an organization level test strategy, then maybe what are the different model based projects which we are doing, what kind of products we are working on. So based on that, we can come up with a test strategy. Or if we are doing a test strategy for a specific product, then yes, what is the model of that? Like maybe there is a business process involved, maybe there are some non-functional requirements for that. It can be a project which require non-functional testing, or maybe there are some other aspects which are based on the product, on the model, sorry. So based on that, in model-based strategy, the tests are designed based on some model of some required aspects of the product. Okay, so over here, the example is given as reliability. Like for example, business process models, state models, and reliability growth models. Okay, so we are familiar, I'm sure, about what's the business process models, like any model which is defining the business processes, state models, which we covered in the state transition diagrams, that based on different conditions, different events, there are transitions from one state to another. And the reliability growth model, okay, reliability growth model is a model of how the system reliability changes over the time during the testing process. Like for example, if we are testing a project and we have come across one area where there are lots of bugs. So that those bugs, as we will proceed with our testing, those bugs will be fixed as well, which means with each bug fixed, we are increasing the reliability of that module. So which means that at the end, we are looking forward to a reliability growth model, like a model which an application which will have a better reliability, a growing reliability as we proceed through the project. Okay, the third one is methodical, sorry. It relies on making systematic use of some predefined set of tests or test conditions. So this is something where, let's say that we already know that I think this would be quite good for, let's say, experience-based testing, which we covered in last session, where we already have some specific skills, specific experienced people in a domain or in a system, and then based on their knowledge, they can come up with, let's say, a checklist of common type of failures that usually in this system, these are the failures which usually happen. So this is more like systematic, that or predefined test, because we are expecting those kind of failures from that system. So we'll make sure that this is part of the test strategy. Or it can be a list of important quality characteristics which is key for a specific product. Or if there are some company-wide look and feel standards for a mobile app or a web app, web pages, then yes, that can be part of these predefined set of tests as well. Okay, the next one is process compliant or standard compliant. So analyzing, designing, and implementing tests based on external rules and standards. So of course, if we are writing a test strategy, then this is also a key thing. If there is a project or a company is doing few projects which needs to be compliance with few regulations or standards, then that needs to be part of the test strategy as well. For example, specified by industry specific standards, or by process documentation, or by the rigorous identification and the use of the test basis, like what kind of requirements are there, or by any process or standard which is imposed on or by the organization. So there can be some standards which the organization wants to be followed, or maybe because the type of organization they are, it's imposed on them that they are compliant with those standards or regulations. So that's part of a test strategy as well. So that's why I was saying that a test strategy, these are different types of test strategies, but if you will see a real-time test strategies, then you will see that most of them, they are combinations of multiple types of these test strategies. Okay, so next one is directed, or it's also known as consultative. Okay, so it's driven primarily by the advice, guidance, or instructions of stakeholders, business domain experts, or technology experts, which means that we are taking advice from someone who has a lot of knowledge. They are expert in those domain areas. Or like, let's say if we are doing any automation testing, then if we have any automation expert in the team, then we are taking advice from them, guidance from them. And it can be someone from the test team, or maybe another team in the organization, or maybe someone outside of the organization as well. The next one is regressive averse. Okay, so now this type of test strategy is motivated by a desire to avoid regression of existing capabilities. Okay, so it doesn't mean that we are avoiding the regression itself. Regression is an important activity, but this type of test strategy states that whenever anything leads to regression, we are trying to reduce the risks which comes with that regression activity. So which means that this strategy, it includes the reuse of existing testware. So for example, if we already have some existing regression test cases, then we can use those regression tests. We can use that data because we have already used that earlier as well. Or if we have automation test, we can use that, or we can try to extend the scope of automation, because that will take us through the regression test quickly. And the same is for the standard test suites as well. So regressive averse is basically to reduce the risks associated with the regression activity by reusing of the tests or test cases or the automation tests which we already have. Okay, so the last one is reactive. This strategy is like testing is reactive to the component or system being tested and the events occurring during test execution rather than being pre-planned. So exploratory testing is a very good example that we don't plan the test in the beginning due to several reasons, and we are this more of a like a dynamic activity, dynamic testing activity, that we are exploring the tests, the application as we are going through it. So the tests are designed and implemented may immediately be executed in response to knowledge gained from prior test results. So we might have, let's say, our test cases, and we have executed those test cases, but based on the results which we are having, we might have some more tests in our mind. So we can perform that, or as we already discussed, the exploratory testing is also an example. So this is the type of test strategy which is known as reactive. Okay, so we have now covered all the test strategies as well. So test strategy and the test approach, this is not the last section in this module. We have quite a few other topics as well, which we will cover in detail in the next session. If there are any questions so far, let me know. We already have, I think, only 5 minutes left now. So otherwise, I will just quickly go through the practice questions. So let's go through the question. And if you have any question meanwhile, then just post it in the Q&A section. Okay, so the first question is, which one is not the task of test leader? So please go through the options and let me know, what do you think is the correct answer? Okay, I've got an answer from UV. Any other answer? Anyone else want to attempt this as well? Okay, let's go through it. So UV has said that D is the correct option. So let's go through the options. Which one is not the task of test leader? Coordinate the test strategy and plan with project manager and others. Okay, so this over here, when we say test leader, I have intentionally used this term, though we have spoken about only the test manager and tester, but a test manager and test leader would be the same role. So if in the test you see this term test leader, then please don't be confused. This would be the same as the test manager. Okay. So yes, this is the activity performed by the test leader. So this is the wrong option. Then decide about the implementation of the test environment. That also what a test manager or a test leader will do. Then write the test summary reports. Okay, this is also responsibility of a test manager. The last one is review and contribute to test plans. Okay, so this is something which is the responsibility of a tester. So D is the correct option. Okay, so yeah, Jatin has also given me the same D. And there is another user which I can't see the name because it's just random number I can see. So yeah, let me know that who's this because I can't see the name. Right, okay, so let's go to the next one. Which of the following is most important in the selection of a test approach? Okay, we have got an answer. Okay, so the username which I can see is 22EB0387. So it's like a random number. So unfortunately, I don't know who's this person. So anyway, we have got two answers. We have got an answer from Madhuri as well. Okay, I have got an answer from Jatin. All right, so I have got two answers which are A, and Madhuri has also answered A, and Jatin has given me the answer C. So now let's go through the options. So what we are looking for is that which of the following is most important in the selection of a test approach. Okay, the number one is availability of tools to support the proposed techniques. Okay, this does look good, but let's see the rest of the options as well. The budget allowed for training in proposed techniques. No, this is not one of the most important in this selection of a test approach. Then the next one is available skills and experience in the proposed techniques. Okay, so if we have to compare C and A, then C would be the best answer. That because what is a test approach? We said that this is the starting point where we will identify that what kind of test techniques we will be using, what kind of test types we'll be using, and yes, tool will be important, but on top of tool, what kind of skill sets we have, what kind of experience we have in terms of resources, that would be the key thing. So let's say that if we have a resource who have skills and experience required to test the project, but we are using a tool which, let's say that person is not have any experience or they haven't used that tool. So that wouldn't be important for us because our test approach will be based on that what kind of skill we need in order to test that specific project. So that will go in the proposed techniques, in the test approach for that proposed techniques. So C would be the correct answer. Let me know, Madhuri, if that's not clear. Okay, so that's clear. That's good. Thanks, Madhuri. All right, so next one is, so this is the last one. As a test manager, you will be getting delayed delivery of build for testing, which has to be deployed on time. You have limited resources. By applying which measures are you able to perform testing in given time? So we have 4 options over here, and let me know, what do you think is the best option? Okay, I have started getting few answers. So all of you have given the option D as the correct answer, which is the right answer. So the last one is prioritize testing based on risk and make sure critical functionality is tested earlier, which is the correct thing to do in that circumstances, because it will happen that where there is a delay in delivery and there is not enough time, and you have to come up with some strategy approach that how you will try to finish that testing, and that will be the responsibility of you as a test manager. So the last one, like prioritizing the test based on the risk, so that the critical ones, the high risk tests are executed first. So that's the correct option. So with that, we have come to the end of our today's session. If there are any questions, then yeah, please let me know. Okay, no question from anyone. All right, so if later on, if there are any questions which you would like to ask, please either post it in the group or just let me know. And as usual, I will upload the slides and the recording of the session as well after we are done. And I will also post the questions for the session as well. For the answers of any previous sessions which you have attempted, and in case if I haven't get back to you, then yeah, please let me know, because I try my best to review all the answers, but maybe I have missed something. So if that's the case, then yeah, please let me know. All right, then till then, have a very nice time and take care of yourself, and I'll speak to you on Thursday then. Take care. Bye.